thank you everyone for being here. This is, it's just lovely having the opportunity. We're both really excited. We're all really excited about having this opportunity to be with everyone and to enjoy some good feelings around health and innate health, and to look again to explore more about how innate health is unlimited, infinite, and so on. And in fact, that's what really came to me, is that when we've been going through all of this, we spoke last time, we spoke last year. If any of you haven't seen that recording of that webinar, you can, there is a link to that, so we'll let you have that. But we spoke last year about what was going on and how everyone was experiencing different thoughts and different feelings and different experiences because of what was going on in the outside world. And it occurred to me that having trained in medicine, I was very disappointed when I first qualified in medicine, because I was like, no, there's something really big missing here. You know, I knew that something was missing. I knew that, for example, I knew that feelings and not so much thought, I wasn't quite into that at that time, but I definitely knew that feelings and emotions had a big effect, had a big affected health. But it was all still coming from the outside, as far as I was concerned. And that's what my training was all about. It was looking at the outside and looking at how these things were caused in our bodies, and not how we might be doing that. And I then went on to train in all sorts of versions of psychotherapy and NLP and EFT and energy healing, and came around to understanding gradually that we created our reality in some ways. I don't think I understood that we did it in all ways, but in some ways we were definitely having an effect. But it wasn't until eventually I gave up my practices, because I was so frustrated that I didn't have the answers and didn't feel that I was helping people or could give people the answers about how to heal and what was going on in their bodies and in their minds and in their relationships. And it wasn't really until just before I came across the 3 principles, that I had an experience myself where I started to understand that actually there is this, I'd always known that there is a power behind life, something, a bigger power than us. But I'd always seen that as outside of me, right? So that, a bit like a lot of people do in religions, is like God is out there, and I am here, and it's bigger and more powerful than me, but it's not. It hadn't occurred to me that I was a part of that. And it was really even after I came across 3 principles. Can everybody make sure that they're, before we go on, can everybody make sure that they're muted, please, because it sometimes, thanks everyone. So yeah, it wasn't until I came across the 3 principles that I started to understand that I was creating all of my reality, including my health and well-being and everything, in fact. But even then I understood it, but it still was not easy to, I still didn't really experience it. And it was only when I did have an experience of being the infinite, being the infinite formlessness that Sid Banks talked about, the infinite formlessness that everything is created out of, and being infinite, there can't be anything outside of that. And I was like, oh right, so there's nothing outside of me, which means that I'm creating everything inside of me, including this physical body, and and all the other people and all the other events that are going on and everything else that's happening is all being created by me inside of me. And that was, oh, okay. And that's been a big difference for me. So that now it's easy to get caught up in the stories and the things that go on every day. But every time I remember my experience, or I have that experience again of being the infinite formlessness, and this body is just a vehicle for this infinite formlessness to be having a human experience through, and a great human experience, to enjoy and to. And now I find it's much easier to focus on, well, how would I like to see the world? And my biggest insight, two big insights, I think, since the last webinar that we did. The first one was that I was thinking, well, okay, so if I am this infinite formlessness and I can create anything, how would I like the world to be? And I suddenly realized that I was really limiting myself, because I was thinking, oh well, I can't expect everyone in the world to be well. I'm like, why not? So because of course some people have got to be ill, and of course some people have got to have this wrong, and of course some people have got to have problems. And like, why? If I can create anything, why would I even think about that? Why would I not be focusing on creating and imagining how wonderful it would be to be in a world where everyone has enough food, everyone has enough to drink, everyone has good quality food and water, everyone has somewhere wonderful to live and is interacting with each other and having a wonderful time together. So that was my biggest insight, was like, yeah, no, I can be imagining that and enjoying imagining that and see what happens. And what's happened is, so far, that I'm in a beautiful place where, as I say, I just am not in a place where anything is going on about the virus at the moment. I'm in the middle of the countryside. I'm walking every day with my dog. I'm having lots of loving experiences with my dog, who is new to me, again, since the last webinar, and have lots of opportunity to learn from him, that when I'm in loving feelings, he does what I say and comes to me without me having to say anything. And when I'm not, when I get scared and think, oh no, he shouldn't be doing that, and no, then he doesn't come. So yeah, and the second insight was really was when I was talking to Dominic, actually, about how I can be more actively creative. And that's what I'm talking about now, is about, yeah, allowing myself to imagine that things are good, and really being in the feeling and really imagining how I want things to be. So now my world is I don't focus on health so much. I focus on the world being healthy. So I in the last couple of years got into learning about permaculture, and so I'm looking at the world being healthy, looking at caring for the world, caring for people, and sharing in the way that we're sharing now, and just being in the best possible feelings. So my understanding of health and healing is being in the best possible feelings and just enjoying the feelings as much as possible. So I'm going to hand over now to our guests. Well, I'm not going to do big introductions, because if you want to know more details about the guests, there's information on the introductory page that you've already read, and links to their websites as well, so you can learn more if you don't know about them already. And So I'm going to, if you're ready, Ian, I'm going to hand over to you and let you continue from here.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to this lovely gathering. I actually missed the last one. I haven't caught up with that yet. Um, it feels to me like we've got such an abundance of webinars and workshops and things happening. I don't know about you, but I've had one literally every day this week so far. So it's pretty cool. But I would like to just say a few words about where my interest has kind of led me. And for those of you who don't know me, my background was I worked in the homeopathic field for about 15 years. So I was a trained homeopath. I did practice, and I also trained homeopathic practitioners myself. I used to run a college and was involved in that, very much immersed in that world. And then I started to get curious about psychological and emotional healing, because I saw that it wasn't always enough just to work with people homeopathically. Sometimes it was helpful, and sometimes I kind of reached the edges of what I could do there. So I spent another 9 years learning lots of things to help people psychologically and emotionally, which were all great things, and processes, self-help things, psychological tools and techniques, and they all worked when they worked, and they didn't when they didn't, and I couldn't really tell you why they didn't when they didn't. So I was still kind of looking to understand that a bit more deeply. And then I came across the Three Principles Understanding in 2011, which felt like a kind of missing piece, and it joined the dots for me very nicely. And that became the kind of foundation of my work since then, and has been ever since. And then since last year, literally a year ago, isn't it really now, that things seem to change rather quickly in the world. And that was a catalyst for me to revisit my homeopathic understanding, because I had this sense of appreciation for it, the fact that I'd learned homeopathy at a relatively young age. And I realized that I hadn't seen a doctor for 42 years. And it's not that I'd never been sick, but whenever I had been sick, I felt quite confident that I could get well using natural means of healing. And I noticed that I wasn't fearful or panicked about any virus or any, to me, it didn't look like a big deal at all. So I kind of wondered, I was curious about how freaked out a lot of people seem to be getting. And it occurred to me that if they had an understanding a bit like the one I've got, they wouldn't be worried about this either. That would be nice. So I actually started to share some of the things that I'd learned through homeopathy that have been helpful to me in the last 12 months or so. So now I've been sort of blending my homeopathic understanding, and what I learned through that was really helpful was how to think holistically and energetically rather than just sort of materialistically about the body. And then to see how that intersects with my understanding of the principles. And it's a really, for me, it's just an ongoing exploration, but it's something that I feel is, again, it brings things together that had seemed somewhat separate. And I've noticed that they seem separate to a lot of other people. For example, a lot of my colleagues in the homeopathic or holistic health field, they can often really struggle because they don't have the principles understanding. So that's become part of my work, is sharing that with practitioners, because I know it would just make their life and their work so much easier. And it does. And they're typically very grateful when they learn it. It's like, oh God, yeah, I wish we'd learned this at homeopathy school or whatever. Again, it proves to be the missing piece in their work. So that's really helpful. But then I noticed that there are many people that I know in the Three Principles world who don't really have a holistic understanding. They don't know anything about homeopathy. They haven't learned any of the things that I've learned about how to think of this body in energetic terms, and to think of healing in a different way, other than orthodox medicine. And so that I was kind of scratching my head about that, thinking, oh, I want a bit of crossover to happen in that direction as well, because I think that might be helpful for the people in the Three Principles community. So I'm doing my best to infiltrate both camps, and we'll see how it goes. But my understanding is that the Three Principles, what that, I think, in a nutshell, what it does for us, it corrects a misperception that we tend to all have to varying degrees about where our experience comes from and how it's getting created. And it turns out that that's a really, really cool thing to have that misperception corrected is not a little thing. You know, as all of you know who are on this call, I'm sure, it turns out to be a game changer. Why? Because we're living in an apparent reality whereby it looks like how we're feeling and how we're doing on the inside is being caused largely, uncreated and influenced by what's happening outside of us. Either what's happened in our past or the circumstances that we're in, the other people in our lives, what's the government doing or not doing. You know, it seems like all of these things are the reason why we feel the way that we feel. So when we start to see through that as a result of discovering the principles, it's fantastic because it takes away a lot of the feeling of being victimized. It's very empowering to realize that actually that's not the case, that even if my circumstances don't change one iota, I can completely change how I'm feeling on the inside and have an entirely different experience of my life without anything outside of me changing. That's pretty powerful. And as you know, most people in the world don't know that. So consequently, they're constantly doing battle with life in some way, shape or form. You know, if only this aspect of my life would change, then I could relax and be at ease and you know, have an enjoyable life experience. But until it changes, I can't. That's not available to me. That's how it looks to most people on the planet right now. So we're very fortunate, those of us on this call, to know that already, at least to have caught a glimpse of that possibility. And the deeper that we see it, the more powerful it is in our life. So that to me is like in a very kind of succinct way, talking about what the three principles understanding does for us. I know there's a lot more to it, but in essence, that's what I feel it's about. Now, an energetic understanding of health and disease, or a holistic understanding of health and disease, I think similarly corrects a misunderstanding there about where disease comes from and how that's getting created. And it turns out that the correction that's required is quite similar because again, if we've just grown up with a, you know, in a kind of normal household and you know, we've learned the things that we've learned from our parents and our teachers and so forth, well, we've also then been taught a misunderstanding about that as far as it looks to me now. Namely that disease is caused by outside agents and that it's basically just random stuff happening out there, very little to do with us. And it's either good luck or bad luck, whether it catches you or it doesn't, or whether you catch it or you don't in the current context. And, you know, the assumption is we've got government campaigns right now telling us act as though you have it, even if you feel fine. you should act as though you've got the virus just in case. And I was like, I mean, to me, this is just hilarious because it's like, what kind of messaging is this? And, you know, there's this idea that it has nothing to do with us and that it's a completely kind of random business and it's just down to good or bad fortune, essentially. And therefore, it's something that we should naturally be very fearful about. You know, it's almost like that's normal. We should, of course, we should be fearful. And when it looks like the reason that something's happening in here is because of what's happening out there, then we have to do something about the out there. You know, there's a kind of logic to it. It's a warped logic, but you can understand the logic. So in the three principles understanding, we see that if we don't understand our experiences being created on the inside, we try to get other people to change. We shift our life situation around. We leave jobs and relationships because we think that's why we're miserable. We work our asses off trying to make more money because we think that'll make us happy. You know, we do all this stuff in the outside because of that misunderstanding. And then similarly, if we think that our health is, or whether we stay healthy or we don't, is dependent on something out there, then we put all our energy into that in the same way. So right now, we've got to make sure that this virus gets under control, it gets killed, it gets eliminated. Everything has to be, the whole planet has to be sterilized, basically. We mustn't breathe the air in case we take it into our body. Again, it's the same idea. It's the same idea. It's an outside-in understanding of health and disease. I'm not saying it's wrong or bad. What I am observing is it's very limiting in terms of how helpful it is, and it creates a lot of fear. and a lot of victimization. Again, essentially it puts us in a place where we are disempowered in terms of our own health. So for me, there's an opportunity here for us to deepen our understanding. And just as we can deepen our understanding about the principles and how our emotional psychological experience is created, we can also deepen our understanding about health and how what looks like this physical form is actually not quite so material as it appears. And we know that, and we know it even from physics, that the apparent material world, if you look closely enough, you go beyond the cellular and you go to the molecular and to the atomic and the subatomic, you just have to look close enough. And what you discover is vast amounts of empty space with vortices of energy moving at such great velocity that it creates the illusion of permanence and solidity. But actually it's all energy. It's just energy in a different form. And as such, it's in constant flow and movement, and it's in constant engagement and interaction with all the energy in the universe, that there isn't actually any separation between us and everything else and everyone else. It's just an appearance. As Einstein put it, it's a very persistent illusion. So it has us fooled, it really does. And just as we deepen our understanding of the principles by basically it's a process of forgetting and then remembering. If you look back at your own experience, we get a glimpse of it and then we lose sight of it and we get caught in something and then we see it again. Only this time we've seen it a little deeper. We've seen it in an area that it hadn't seemed to be true before. So, and that seems to be ongoing as far as I can tell. And life's always going to present us with new opportunities to see it deeper. I think similarly, we also evolve in our consciousness, it looks to me, through the challenges that are inherent in the fact that we are spiritual beings embodied in what looks like a solid physical form, but actually is purely energetic. And there are challenges inherent in that, which have to do with the experiences that are fundamental to that are birth, sex, death, illness, healing, all of these things. These are the kinds of things that enable us to grow and evolve also. So to me, my relationship to illness is not that it's something that should never happen, because I know from my own life experience, and I know many close friends too, when we go through an illness and when we get well and we really heal, we don't just go back to how we were. In the same way as when we have a powerful insight through the principles, there's no going back to that place we were in before we had the insight. It actually moves us forward, it evolves us in some way. And healing can do that for us as well. I think there's something purposeful and meaningful in that, but we have to have that context for it. We have to be willing, we have to be willing participants, if you like, as opposed to unwilling victims. And as long as we're kind of unwilling victims of disease, we don't really get the gains that are potentials from it. And for me, healing, the root of the word healing is the same root as of the word wholeness. And as I understand it, healing, I'm not just talking about getting rid of disease or disease avoidance or management of symptoms. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about true healing. To me, it has to do with coming to wholeness within ourselves, which is an incremental journey for most of us. And as we come to deeper wholeness within ourselves, as Anne just shared beautifully in the beginning there's a certain point where we start to realize that the boundaries between self and other are not as real as they seem either. And that we also then move in the direction of coming to wholeness with everything else too. And I feel that that's part of the healing that we are collectively undergoing right now. It's not just about individual healing, although it starts there. Because as you know, in the principles understanding, and the same is true as regards our health, if we don't see it for ourselves, we ain't much use to anybody else. So, it starts there. We have to see the truth of this for ourselves first, but then we can carry that understanding out into the world and we can genuinely contribute something beautiful. And we can help to elevate other people's understanding so that we become part of the solution. We become part of the evolution of consciousness that I feel is really being accelerated at this time. So on the one hand, yeah, there's a lot of craziness going on right now, and a lot of people suffering, both psychologically and some physically too. That's true, but there's also huge potential for, I feel, for a very powerful and profound shift in consciousness. And we just have to be willing to be on board with that, it seems to me. And I'm not even sure whether we get a choice about that or not. My assumption is if you're here, you're on board already. That's how it looks to me. So that's really all I want to say by way of kind of overview and introduction to where I'm coming from. But I'm very happy to receive people's questions later on.
That's lovely. Thanks very much, Ian. That's brilliant. So yeah, okay, so there will be a chance to ask questions after the break. And in the meantime, we're going to move on now and ask Karen to talk for her slot. Are you ready, Karen?
I am, but a warning, I'm over caffeinated. So
that's good. That's
I'm going to consider this to be my squirrel cage. So in case I squirrel off, just, Dominic, raise your hand if I go off. Okay, I'll just look to you. Just come on back, Karen. Just so part of my metaphorical squirrel cage is I thought I'd share a little bit about me and my story. I have like 4, because I talk about this shizzle a lot. I have 4 points I think I'll address that kind of stories, anecdotes that'll not only keep me in a cage, but also be helpful for everybody else. And then 4 takeaways. So we'll give it a whirl. We'll see what happens. So I'm Karen. It's lovely to see you. Well done, everybody, for getting here. 150,000 people did not wake up today. So we got another one. Pretty cool, huh? My background's in nursing. I spent 20 years in the specialties of intensive care and trauma, flight nursing. I didn't want to be a nurse. I became one because my mom told me to, and which is kind of part of the story. And I thought, okay, if I'm going to be a nurse, I'm going to be a super nurse. I want people to picture me in an orange flight suit walking toward them in slow motion with an Aerosmith song playing in the background. Like, so that's the reason I went into trauma. It wasn't because of me. It was because of how concerned I was about what my image for everybody else. And eventually this concern that if I think about it as far back as I can go in my life, that I remember learning language. Why do you dress like boys? Oh, I didn't know that was wrong. Clean your plate, but I'm not hungry. Share your toys, but I don't like that asshole. Apologize, but I don't feel sorry. Any of this familiar to all of you? We all get these messages growing up. We're told from the moment we understand language to stop paying attention to ourselves because something's wrong about that. Boys don't cry. Fake it till you make it. All these messages that we get separate us from ourselves, and we learn to not trust the innate wisdom, that we're born with, that all animals in nature have, their instincts. We are taught as human beings to ignore those. Well, part of my growing up and why I got so sick was because somewhere along the line in my childhood, I didn't want to be, I don't know what it was, we all, it's a wonder any of us get out of this thing alive. Adolescence is, well, actually we don't, but I digress. Adolescence, right? It's all got its trauma, abuse, travesty, tragedy, depending on who you are. For some reason, my most painful memories, and it wasn't even the worst things that happened to me. There was the molester down the street. Everybody has one of those. Oh no. Anyway, there was I have 3 older brothers, and they're my heroes and my best friends. And some of my worst feelings when I was a kid was being left behind, when they would leave me behind. they would go off with their friends, and I was the youngest. My mom always joked that she had 4 sons and I was the only one who grew boobs because I just wanted to hang out with my brothers. I was the biggest tomboy, and eventually they got older and I was still little and I was annoying and they would leave me behind. And my mom worked and I was alone so much and it was so painful. And so I made up in my little head, if I don't want to be left behind. In order to be not left behind, people need to like me. And in order for people to like me, I need to be smart. I need to be witty. I need to be thin. I need to be pretty. I had all these things that I needed to check, all these boxes I needed to check in order for people to like me so I didn't get left behind. And my whole life became an algorithm. So not only the normal stuff of, boys don't cry and clean your plate and all that stuff, I wanted to check boxes. I didn't want to. I did. I checked boxes all day long, every day, in order to be liked, in order to not be left behind. By the age of 37, I'll skip forward in the story. I was so concerned about my people's perceptions of me. That's why I became a nurse. That's why I became a trauma nurse. That's why I became an ICU nurse. Like all those things. That's why I got married when I got married. It's how I parented was according to how the world said it ought to be, so that people like me, so that I don't get left behind. By the age of 37, I had chronic fatigue syndrome. I mean, I went through this program with the University of Arizona in partnership with this woman, Karen Mershrow, to learn how to be a professional private patient advocate. And part of that program was, I thought I was going to learn the basics of legal and business ins and outs of being a private patient advocate. That was like 10% of it. It was like going there thinking the world was flat and somebody showed me a satellite picture. I learned about functional medicine, systems biology, epigenetics, nutrigenomics, all these things that point to root cause of illness, how fluid our genes are. It was like, oh my gosh, people don't have to be sick. It was such an amazing thing. And that turned me on to all other kinds of sciences. And curiosity is my superpower, right? Like I will go down rabbit holes, squirrel cage. I need one, or people don't see me for days. But anyway, where was I? So I learned in that program what could be wrong with me potentially. And I came back and I'm like, I hadn't, like Ian said, nurses and doctors do not go to nurses and doctors. Like, we're the worst patients. We avoid hospitals. I hadn't been to a doctor, even though my symptoms at the time were chronic pain, fatigue. Like somebody had turned up the gravity fatigue, and every year that went by, the gravity got heavier. Like I couldn't stay awake. I had my worst symptom, and the scariest thing was absolute dementia. Brain fog so bad I would lose the ends of moments. Throughout my day, I'd hang up the phone. Was that my mother? Was I talking to somebody just now? Like I couldn't remember. And I would wake up at the mall with my 3 little kids, not wake up out of a sleep, but wake up, just kind of come to. And there's my 2-year-old in the stroller and my other 2 little daughters alongside. I'm like, how did we get here? I don't remember dressing them. I didn't remember getting them in the car. I didn't remember driving to the mall. And so I went to that program and I knew there was an answer for me. So I came home, went to an integrative medicine doctor. I thought, okay, she's integrative, so she won't just give me some pills, right? She'll figure out what's wrong with me. Well, sure enough, integrative was because she recommended meditation. She gave me 3 diagnoses and 3 prescriptions, wanted to give me 3 prescriptions for each. And I said, don't write that in my chart. I want to know what's wrong. Well, many women your age. So one thing that I learned that fascinated me was neuroadrenal testing. How you could kind of look under the chemical hood of somebody's symptoms and see kind of what's going on. It wasn't a fix, but you could it was just another diagnostic to understand. So I was fascinated with this and I wanted to learn it for myself. So I got a mentor, Dr. Jess Armine, and he is well known in the world for teaching and understanding this stuff like Mozart. So he was my mentor and I was my first patient, and we got my test back. Now the nervous system has a gas pedal and a brake. And when I got my test back, all the chemistry associated with the gas and all the chemistry associated with the brake was in the toilet. Absolutely non-existent. PEA is a neurotransmitter that has to do with focus, concentration, and short-term memory. It was non-existent. It was like the lowest you could get. I could show you pictures. Cortisol was totally flatlined. So it takes like 7 to 10 years to get to that phase of adrenal exhaustion. And so Jess says, the first thing he says to me when we're going over my test, he's like, "You're faking it." Oh, what do you mean I'm faking it? He's like, "Well, you come off as this, all go, no quit, never let them see us sweat, all American, bubbly thing." And he's like, most people with a test 50% better than this are catatonically depressed, suicidal. They cannot, and I had all these things. I spent a lot of my time during my day thinking about how much I'd just rather not be here. But then I'd go to hell, and what would people think of me? Right? So, I mean, that probably saved my life a lot, is I was so concerned about what people would think of me after I was dead. But something about what Jess said and pointing it out to me brought the white noise of how I'd been living my life down to a loud roar. And I saw it. It was, I don't know if you want to call it an insight, but that's just what it felt like to be Karen. I didn't know I was living my life according to the expectations of others to that degree that it was making me so ill. Chronic Lyme disease, candida overgrowth, dementia. I mean, like, I was 37. I had an eating disorder from the age of 11 to the age of 37. It ended on that day. I had white knuckle control over it, but it ended that day because all of a sudden I went, okay. I saw it and I knew I could not keep living like this anymore. And I was so convinced that everyone was going to leave me behind. My husband was going to divorce me. My kids were not going to like me. My parents would disown me. I'd blow up. I'd like just become like 1,000 pounds and people would have to pry me out of my house. I was so convinced that would happen, but I didn't care. Or maybe I cared, but I stopped thinking about it. And all of a sudden, it was quiet. I spent all day long, every day for 37 years, thinking about the algorithm. If I do this, say this, wear that, weigh that, then that person will think, blah, 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 blah. It was gone. And it was quiet. And I spent 3 weeks in kind of this floaty whatever. And how it looked was, it looked like instead of, I was like just so tired and just so quiet and peaceful that instead of doing something, like the kids would be like, we'd be late for school. And instead of, come on, kid, get out of the bathroom, save your poop for school. Well, we don't want the teachers to not like us, right? We don't want to be late because then I'll be that mom. It was like, oh, well, I guess I'm just that mom. I guess I'm just that wife. And people started peeling off, but I was just like so quiet and didn't have to think about it. And I didn't want to go back. And wouldn't you know it, 3 weeks later, I'm driving in my car and it's 4:00 p.m. And I'm like, I'm not tired. It like just happened. And I just recognized oh my gosh, I haven't even thought about food and how much I weigh and how I look. And I mean, like, it was just like, oh my gosh, gone. All the symptoms, everything I'd been dealing with. And now I understand how much time do I have. Dominic, you're my timekeeper. No, I'm just kidding. Anne.
Yeah, no, you're getting near time. So just whenever you're ready. You've got
okay.
I'll
wrap it up. That was the first of the 4 points that I wanted to get to, but there we go. You can ask me about the others later. It's so important. There's 3 things that make us sick. There's physical, environmental things, toxins, blunt force trauma, things like that can make us sick. There's microbial things, apparently, right? This is what we're told, and psychological things. Now, our immune systems are well equipped to take care of the first 2. We're great at, sometimes we need help, but we're great at detoxifying. We're great at fighting out critters. We have armies of things, of soldiers in us that are constantly helping us out, cleaning up the shop, right? The third thing that makes us sick is our psychology. And I'm not talking just our mood. Because if all of your energy, like with me, is being prioritized for your psychology, then your immune system is either going to react very primitively, and when you get sick, you really get sick, or it's not going to really react at all. That's why I wasn't, my immune system was shot. But here's the thing, an overactive psychology can also cause illness. It creates inflammation, massive amounts. So the next thing I was going to talk about, which I won't, is a story of Anita Moorjani. I was going around lecturing about cleaning up your diet and stress management and all this stuff that you have to do in order to be well. And then I read her story. I'm like, wait a minute, this woman's cancer went away overnight she didn't change her diet. She actually stopped eating so strictly. She stopped meditating. She didn't get an exercise program or getting more sleep. She had an insight. And I kind of went, oh, that's what happens. So that's kind of my background now, is psychoneuroimmunology is the technical word, how the brain affects in radical remission, and what do people have in common, and why aren't we looking at that as instead of controlling symptoms and pulling switches? That's not our job. And when we take our hands off the wheel, our homeostatic mechanisms for mind, body, and spirit take over. We're the ones holding it apart. So kind of my work now is how to help people, including myself, taking life less seriously. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think taking life less seriously, very important. I practice that all the time.
people take not taking life so seriously way too seriously.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Dominic now.
Wow, I wasn't sure I could make it through Karen's talk without just losing it. She and I did Super Coach Academy together. So I was, I guess, 9 months in various cities and various hours and hours of, kind of the workshops. And from the first moment when she stood up and started talking, and it's like just funny comes out of her, right? And it wouldn't matter what she said, I'd lose it. And then at some point it was like a tension. Every time she stood up, I was like taking a grip here because I'm going to lose it as she starts talking. And that's the way I feel when her Facebook posts, whenever I see a Facebook post, I'm like, okay, I won't be able to get through it. I'll be snorting, right? Like by the time you read it. So thanks, Karen. And Ian, wonderful to meet you. Heard so much about you and all that in the community. So I when it comes to this understanding, and I thought about this topic, I think Anne said it in the beginning, where as I was thinking about the topic and the invitation, and I was like, I'm not that focused from a health perspective, and certainly illness perspective and the problem perspective. So I'm like, what am I gonna say about this stuff? And that is one thing about the principles that has always never resonated well. There's a lot of talk around, it's innate mental health, but people speak about like, let's get to where it's not that. And let's, talk about, helping, right? All of those things. And so this part never resonated with me. And actually in this invitation, I was kind of like, so what am I doing there? Why am I there? Because this isn't my thing, right? To be talking about that or to be looking at that. I don't have a lot of interest in that. And what I saw was, because where my interest goes and is really, I'm interested in thriving. My curiosity is about human thriving, flourishing, living life. My interest is all over there. And so it's kind of just, that way. So when you think about, let's talk about, Sydney Banks said that there is the energy of all things. the energy of all things that he said is God. And he didn't like using that word because there's too much baggage around it, but it's the energy of all things. And you are that energy of all things. He said you are a microscopic aspect of the energy of all things, which means you are God, right? So, you know, if you really got that, there wouldn't be much to talk about when it comes to health and any of that stuff, right? If you really got who you are. And so I really see that much of this always comes back to you. Do you know who you are? Do you know who you are? Because that would solve everything. Do you know who you are? Are you aligned with who you are? Are you in harmony with who you are? Do you see who you are? That really would solve everything. You wouldn't, we would just be moving on to having fun, because there's nothing serious going on here. If we knew who we were, we would just be interested in the fun of this life experience. We'd be interested in the joy of this life experience. Because we would really see there is nothing serious going on here. So if you are the energy of all things, and a part of you is focused into this physical existence, so there is a pure consciousness focused here as you, focused into that physical body. But every cell in your body is made of consciousness. The energy of all things means the energy of all things. Every cell in your body has consciousness. And that consciousness has well-being flowing to it. That consciousness is able to take care of itself, right? And sometimes it takes care of itself through you. In fact, when it comes to your body, that's mostly how it does it. So what it does through every cell of your body that has consciousness. And then there's, of course, the collective consciousness of each organ in your body. And every one of those consciousness knows what's needed and knows what thriving is. And so sometimes you are the path to what is needed. And so you might notice that when you get thirsty, it's because the consciousness in the cells of your body are asking. They need stuff, right? You get something about wanting to eat salty foods, or you want to eat this or that. And, you know, and then the only thing that could ever interfere with that is your bright ideas, which is just thought, right? So that without those bright ideas, there would just be a flow. Consciousness would flow. There's only well-being. It's all flourishing. It only flourishes. And so, yeah, there's bright ideas. So like, well, it's not appropriate to, you know, I need to drink more water. I shouldn't be, you know, certainly shouldn't be drinking coffee. And then, you know, and then not too much sweets, and too much salt isn't good for you either. So at this point, I've taken over God's job, and you know, he's going to read about all this stuff. I'm going to get this whole thing handled, right? And take over and just kind of figure out how this all works, because I want to make sure that this is handled properly, right? Now, there's no other being that really does that, right? If you look at animals, you know, a dog will eat grass, but you're not supposed to. Like, well, we know that anyway. The dog doesn't seem to, but, you know, at some point they'll eat grass. So there is something in the grass, depending how that dog is feeling. There is something in the grass. And so consciousness calling itself, asking for something, and that is always answered. When you ask, it is given. When you ask, it is given. When you ask, it is answered. And the dog allows the answering to happen. So that dog will eat the grass. So there's not, like us, this thought resistance. So a thought resistance, I've never eaten grass before, and most of the other dogs don't eat grass. How I can't be that inappropriate. As what are they going to think of me if I'm eating the grass? So, dogs usually don't have this kind of resistant thinking going on. So basically, as the impulse comes, and we call it instinct, right? It's just allowed. It is allowed. It is not stopped. It is just flows. They are moved to action, and it works in a way that is thriving. So I like when you think about us in a state, kind of the innate natural state, what is a state of thriving for us? Well, what we do is we'll look energetically. Let's look energetically. Who you are is consciousness. You are the energy of all things. Well, that energy of all things, God, and you're a microscopic aspect of that. Well, what is that energy? That is a very high frequency energy. It is, and your connection to it, you can sort of check, is your connection to it is you notice you are breathing, right? So you notice you are breathing, you notice the organs are functioning, the things are working in your body. There's like something moving through your body. This energy is moving. And so you aren't doing that, right? You aren't breathing. It seems to be breathing you. It seems to be living you. It seems to be animating you. And so that is who you really are. And when you look at who you really are, that is a very high frequency energy. And people will often call, God or this energy, which they'll say, oh, it's love. Just a label. It's an interpretation of what that kind of an energy, right? We interpret it. Oh, love, peace, clarity, knowledge, infinite intelligence. There's different labels that try to describe all the same thing. We then focus. We are a focused on aspect, a focused consciousness here. And we are made in the image of the Creator, right? We are made in the image of the Creator, which means we share the nature. We share in that nature of consciousness. We are made in the same image. We share the nature of consciousness. The only reason we can feel anything, in 3 principles we talk about, you are always feeling your thinking. You are always feeling your thinking. Well, by the way, we also will say, but all thought is neutral. Thought is neutral, right? But so it's neutral, but you can feel your thinking. You're always feeling your thinking. So let's look at what exactly that means. There are really 2 perspectives here. And the perspective when you lay back and you become all that you are resonant with all that you are. You are in this very high frequency vibration or feeling. And that feeling is one of love, peace, joy, clarity, bliss. It could be described as. That is in the perspective of all that you are. In the perspective that you show up here in this world to move around and be here, it is focused into a perspective where it's a different perspective than the perspective of all that you are, a finite perspective. And as we focus consciousness and think here, our thoughts relative to this perspective are what we're feeling. So when I am here and I am thinking less than what I am, I will feel the disharmony in that. So I want to be in a relationship and I'm not in a relationship. I want to be in one and I'm not in one. I'll feel lonely or whatever. That feeling of doubt, I don't think I'll ever find a partner, and besides, I don't think they'd be interested in me, and all the good ones are fake. Whatever thing we're saying creates a sort of a disharmony because it's not true. It's not true. It's a belief. It's a thought. And in that disharmony, what we feel is disharmony compared to harmony of the vibration of those differences. And that's where we say, well, you're feeling your thinking. But it's not actually your thinking. It's not actually the thinking that you're feeling, is you're feeling the truth of what you're thinking relative to the truth. That is what you feel. The truth in this moment of the perspective that you hold relative to the truth. So as you move into a state of fear, disempowerment, depression, the bumpiness, disharmony in that perspective to the truth of who you really are, that you will feel. As you are allowing the perspective of all that you are to flow through you, what you feel is ease. As you allow that, you feel ease. As you depart from that, you will feel dis-ease. The further you depart, the more dis-ease you will feel. And here's the thing about this energy, it manifests. That energy, Citibank's called it thought, mind, consciousness. It's all the same thing. He used different labels. Thoughts become things. Thoughts manifest. Thoughts become the things of your life, right? So when you are in a state of ease, that is what is manifesting. And when you move into a state of dis-ease with all that you are, that is also what will manifest. And so this is our guidance system too. It's a simple guidance system. It's a guidance system that says move toward more ease, move toward more ease. If you want thriving, just move toward more ease. Well, how do I do that? How do I do that? Well, you can't do that if you're going to insist on thinking and perspectives that are in a disharmony with the truth. Well, how am I supposed to know? You will feel it. How am I supposed to know? Well, you'll feel it. It's not complicated. There's not anything to really do. If I move my hand closer and closer to a hot flame, you'll feel it. Well, then what do I do about it? Well, let's try it. Let's see what you'll do about it. Just try it. We'll see what you do about it. You don't need to know what to do about it. Common sense will tell you what to do about it. Back away from that. Back away from that thinking. Back away from that perspective. Are you willing to let that go, or do you want to keep holding on to it? That term, by the way, holding on to it, is what we're doing. We're like holding on to. This is when you go into disharmony, like that person really wronged me, you know, and I'm not going to put up with it. In fact, I am going to hold it against them. And kids are really good. If kids are perfect to watch with this, because if you get them mad, right? If you've ever with your kids and they're mad, and then later on you try to make them laugh, and they don't like that because, you know, they're like trying to hold on to this anger that they feel, right, for you. And you're now playing and trying to make them laugh, and they're holding it. That's where the terms like holding a grudge. See, the problem is, if I forget how you wronged me, then you're going to get away with it. So I'm going to hold on to it. I'm going to hold this grudge. Well, here's the deal. You can't hold on to thought. Thought is ephemeral. It floats around. So if you want to hold on to it, you'll have to hold it somewhere, literally, physically hold it in your body. So when you get into states of dis-ease, you will need to hold them physically in your body somewhere. And oh, my back hurts. I don't know. I've had this thing and my back hurts, and then I get this thing in my neck. Oh, what's going on? It's probably just getting old. Well, what does that mean? You've just had longer time to hold grudges and hold on to thoughts and practice these beliefs, and make sure you hold on to them, because thought's ephemeral and it'll float away. If you don't keep holding this stuff, it'll all disappear, right? So that's, I think I should pause. I think I'm at 15. I don't know the time, but
yeah, no, that's just about
Yeah.
right. Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dominic. So yeah, anybody, again, if anyone has any questions for any of the speakers after Tania has spoken. There's just Tania, and then we're going to have a short break, and then you can ask as many questions as you like. So, Tania, are you here? Are you ready now?
Yes, I am. I am on the computer and here, thank goodness. And it's so interesting. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tania. I work a lot with women at midlife, perimenopause and menopause, and I also live in Israel, which has a very interesting role to play these days in this extraordinary year. And I went back and looked at the last webinar we did in June, and back then I was talking about, we have slightly different in Israel because we don't have so many cases and etc. And now we're like in the headlines all the time with we're the most vaccinated, and now we have the most people in ICUs, but never mind. This is all going on, and I want to share a few stories, and perhaps one that I will share is that there was this law passed in Israel that gave people's details to local authorities, unvaccinated people's details to local authorities, so that they can call us up and ask us what's going on. And just a few days ago, I received a call, and I saw that it looked like a local number. And most of the calls I receive are not really local numbers. Most calls I receive are either registered on my phone or someone's mobile phone or something. And I was like, oh my goodness, this must be the local authority coming to harass me. And I have in my phone this little piece of paper with what I should say in order for them to take me off their database. And I was like, feeling all tense, and I answered the phone. Yes, hello, who is it? And it was a delivery person who had some chocolates to deliver, actually, from maybe someone on this call. And that's what I feel like maybe the start of this webinar felt for me when the computer was crashing, and I thought, oh my goodness. But what I would really like to share as I look back at this really extraordinary year, which for me has taken me to new levels of freedom and new levels of awakening in a sort of most shocking sense. Looking at the freedom really is described in the title of this webinar, in Innate Health Unlimited, and really seeing how everything that I had understood about where our innate health lies in the context of my work with women with physical and emotional symptoms, and helping others too with their symptoms, actually was so much more incredible and boundless and infinite than I had imagined. And this is what I've learned over the past year in terms of where does our innate health lie. And like Ian was talking about, and too, this very big sense of the inside out. It's just not outside in no way. And we've got caught up in this outside in notion that's leading the world into the most incredible places. And it's fascinating to watch and to wonder, well, when are we going to start looking inside? When are we going to start looking inside? As society, certainly around me right now, seems to be getting sicker and sicker and more into psychosis, it's like, well, when will the awakening happen? But I wanted to also look at, if we are on this edge, it feels like to me, of this new world evolving, then what is our role in it? And Zach Bush talks about, for those of you who know Zach Bush, MD, has incredible passion also for the environment and farming, etc. He talks about how incredible it is that 8 billion of us have showed up on the planet right now. And the question, do we have a role to play that we showed up, and how that role might, how it might look, what it might look like to each one of us. And I wanted to share a few stories. So I'll go back a number of decades, and I just moved to Paris. And I just found an apartment and a new job. And it was about 12 minutes walk between my job and my home. And I was coming down one boulevard, and I thought, oh, that looks like a shortcut to get to where my apartment was, just off another boulevard, and I'll take it. And so I turned down the shortcut. It was quite dark alley, and I realized it was an alley going nowhere. So I turned around and was walking back to the boulevard, and all of a sudden there are these two guys in front of me. And at the time I had sort of I was working as an English teacher in Paris, and so I had sort of a briefcasey kind of bag, that kind of portfolio bag. And as they approached me, one of them just took it and ran down the alley. And I had a kind of explosion inside, which I believe is kind of fight or flight. And I remember thinking, oh, fuck. And at the same time, how dare he? And I turned around and I ran after them. And I got to the end of the alley, and they had turned around to face me. And I was screaming at them with my best English, which I guess they understood a few of the words. And as I'm screaming at them, there comes a point where I suddenly feel my hair is turning into snakes. And I take a breather and I think, this is so interesting. I'm becoming Medusa. And the guy who's holding my bag throws it at my feet, and they both run up the alley. And I scream after them, and someone kind of stops them, but then lets them get away anyway. Sometime later, I'm back in my apartment, and I have two flatmates back in my flat with two flatmates who both come from Brazil. And I'm telling them about what just happened. And they look at me and they're like, you are mad. You are crazy. Do you know what happens to you if you do that in Brazil? Do you know how dangerous it is what you did? Do you know? Thinking, okay, yeah, I'm crazy. Okay, but okay, we weren't in Brazil, and it's not like I thought about it, right? It's just something that happened. A year later, I'm in Vietnam with a friend from Paris, actually, and we're walking down the street, and we're backpackers. And I'm a kind of backpacker that I keep my valuables close to me, but she, for some reason, kept them in a pouch that she had here. And we're walking down the street, and I see a guy approaching us, and all of a sudden he reaches out towards her pouch and runs. I run after him. I rugby tackle him, get him down on the ground, but he gets up and he runs away. And as I'm coming to, after getting myself up from the ground, I hear my friend, Tania, qu'est-ce que tu fais? What are you doing? I was like, Elise, he's just taken your pouch. I know what's in your pouch. Tania says, he didn't take my pouch. He grabbed my breast. We laughed about that for about 3 days, about how that guy wasn't about to grow anyone anytime soon. And the reason why I'm sharing these stories with you is not so you hire me as a bodyguard or something like that when you go on a travel somewhere. Those were in my 20s. I don't know how I got today. But because during this crisis, I've spoken up and I've shared what I believe is a hopeful message, which is we really don't need to fear. Our health is an inside job. And our health is much more, it doesn't have the boundaries that you think that it does. And all this story about those things outside of us that are going to attack us, it's not true. And I've been called dangerous and stupid and crazy. And who am I to speak up because I'm not a doctor? And I've been trying to tell people, I do actually work trying to bring people to a place of healing. So really in my spare time, I'm really not going to put people into danger. Like, it just doesn't make sense. No, you're dangerous and you're crazy. And I've been thrown out of group after group after group on Facebook, too many groups that I can even remember. And when that happens, people reach out to me quietly in a private message. And they say, Tania, I just want to thank you for being so brave. And I want to tell them, don't worry, I'm not being brave. I have Medusa in my pocket. Like, it's for me, it's not maybe what it is for you. And then they ask, well, but I want to be able to speak out like that. And I say to them, really, I show up where I'm inspired to show up. And that's what we can all do. Show up where we're inspired to show up. And so for me, you know, if there is a crisis and if I see injustice, then I will speak up. And I see that pattern throughout my life, from when I spoke up against the school bullies and got sent to Coventry, which for Americans, I don't think you know that expression, or from other places in the world, like no one talks to you for a week or whatever. You know, that I did that. And when I was a student, I ran to the mic and made speeches that weren't necessarily popular at the time. And in my workplace, I've been the one to speak up. I've had Medusa in my pocket for a long time. And other people have probably other archetypes in their pocket. And so when there is a crisis, I may speak up if I'm inspired to. And other people will make soup. Now I can make soup, but it won't be the thing I'll think about first. And I want to bring this message because it keeps coming up with people saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do in this crisis. And I tell them, but maybe for you, the best thing you can do is spend more time with your kids, or look after that old person down the street that you're helping them out with some food and some shopping, or whatever it is, whatever you feel inspired to do. And we're all going to show up differently in this time of crisis. But there is a reason, it seems, that we've all come together at this point, and we all have a different role to play. And in this community, I think we have a head start because we understand something about innate health. And when we just let go, innate health becomes even clearer. It becomes unlimited. And we have a special message that we can bring to the world. And I'm so excited that we can do that, because at this point that feels like crisis, that feels like things are breaking down, we do have a lot to offer. And when we offer it, we show up when we're inspired to show up and how we're inspired to do that. So hopefully people may find something interesting in that message. And I will hand it back to you. I know we will go for a break. We'll take a break for 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think 10 minutes is okay, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you. That was lovely.
So,
thank you for all that, Anne and Tanya and Ian and Dominic. That was so inspiring to listen to. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us and for sharing too. And hopefully we've got like a great mix of perspectives in that we can now, you know, sit with. Let's settle. And I'm looking forward to the questions that people can ask individually, or whoever feels inspired to answer. So should we join back at
1:30?
Half
Come
past,
back at
yeah.
1:30, yeah.
Half past,
Okay, so
okay.
10 minutes break, and then we'll see you back here.